Okay, welcome back. Part 5, practice questions. Check out the other 4 videos and the full task list review as you're preparing. It's good to go back through those and answer those, especially ones you missed. If you start to see repeats, that's okay. You should know these fluently. Repetition's one of the best ways to learn, so answer them anyway and see what you can get. Don't forget to subscribe. Email me for the study guides, and yeah, let's go. Okay. Question 1. Escape, attention, tangible, and sensory. This should be automatic. Okay. This should be the easiest question on the test. If you don't know anything else as an RBT, you need to know this. So when you hear escape, attention, tangible, or sensory, what should you think? Should you think functions, teaching strategies, types of prompts, or dimensions? This is easy. Functions. Okay. If you don't know anything else, you have to know these 4 functions of behavior. Okay, it's just how we start to develop treatment plans and how we start to treat behaviors. If we don't know the function, if we don't know why the behavior is occurring, okay, we won't be able to treat it correctly. So when your BCBA or your supervisor asks you why is something happening, you should give them one of these 4. Okay, even if you're not certain. Okay, you should start forming an idea. Okay, are they doing it to escape? Are they doing it for attention? Are they doing it to gain an item, or is it a automatic thing? Okay. Either way, this should be an easy question. Okay. Escape, attention, tangible, sensory, functions of behavior. Signals that reinforcement is available. Okay. So how should you approach this question? All right. It looks confusing at first, right? So unless you really know your definition, this could be tricky. All right. So if you have no clue, just look at the answers. Okay. Go to the choices and start to kind of form an idea. See what you can eliminate. So A, SD are discriminative stimuli. Okay. So to me, yeah, that would signal that reinforcement is available. So we'll keep A open. S delta. What is an S delta? An S delta usually signals something isn't available. Okay. So you should be able to eliminate B. Okay. If you see S delta, okay, the delta means it's not there. Okay. So an S delta for punishment signals that punishment is not available, right? So S delta can be taken out. SR minus. Now, what is this? This is negative reinforcement. Okay. Or so when you see these shorthands, all right, if this was R plus, okay, you could call it positive reinforcement, right? It's signaling that negative reinforcement is there. Okay. um, but well, it's not signaling reinforcement is there. It's just saying this is negative reinforcement. Okay. So C is out. D, VR3. Well, what is this? What is VR? Okay, you should know this from the past videos. Okay, these are one of our reinforcement systems, but it's a schedule, right? It's not the signal. Okay, it's when we're delivering reinforcement. Okay, on a variable ratio of 3, but we're not. It's not the signal. That's the schedule. Okay, so we've eliminated these 3, right? S delta signals it's not available. This is negative reinforcement. That's not what it's asking, and this is a reinforcement schedule. So, yes, an SD, our discriminative stimuli, does signal that reinforcement is available. But even if you didn't know that, hopefully you would know enough to be able to eliminate the rest of them. However, at least understand that when you're giving an SD, what you're doing is you're signaling to the student or the client that there's reinforcement available for responding to that SD. And at the heart of an SD, that's what it is, okay? I say touch green as my SD, I'm signaling that if they touch green, reinforcement is available. Okay. I would try to memorize that and try to really ingrain that so you don't have to go through that process. Okay. Just understand fundamentally what an SD actually is instead of just saying, oh, well, that's the SD. I don't really know what it is. Understand on a conceptual level what it is and what it's doing. Okay. Because that's what you're going to be doing every day, right? Giving SDs and signaling. If you respond to this SD, there's reinforcement available. Okay. Tricky question. Okay, increases the future likelihood of behavior. So let's say you're taking the test and you go from the SD question to this one. This one is significantly easier. Okay, but if you get them back to back so close, okay, you might fall into the trap of getting confused and overthinking this. Okay, think of what the question is asking. It's increasing, right? Increasing, what is that? Reinforcement, okay? Future likelihood of behavior. So let's find it. A, punishment. No, what does punishment do? Decreases behavior. Motivation. Motivation can have an impact, right? But it's not what's increasing the future likelihood of behavior, okay? Um, Reinforcement's coming after the behavior. Motivation comes before, all right? Rewards, careful. Yes, rewards can be reinforcing, but are all rewards reinforcing? No, okay? I can give you a reward, right? I can give you a brand new tennis racket, okay, for getting an A on your test. But if you don't play tennis, if you don't like tennis, is that going to reinforce you? Probably not, right? Okay. So be careful. Remember, not everything that's given and not every reward or everything that we or society considers a positive, right, is actually reinforcing. What does reinforcement mean? It means it changes the behavior, okay? It increases the behavior or maintains it in some way. It has an effect on the behavior. Okay. So the only answer here is D. Okay. Easy question. Don't get tripped up. Okay. Don't get tripped up. Gotta remember, increases reinforcement. Not all rewards are reinforcing. Okay. That's the difference between a preference assessment and a reinforcer assessment, right? Okay. Couple tricky ones. Okay. Reinforcement is delivered on the average of every 2 minutes in which the behavior occurs. Okay. So what are we looking at when you're reading the questions? Okay. Don't get overwhelmed. Go piece by piece. Okay. We're talking about reinforcement being delivered on average. So we're talking about a reinforcement schedule. Okay. So what is our schedule going to be? On average of every 2 minutes. Okay. So what are our two types? We have interval, okay, which is time, or ratio, which is response. What are we looking at here? Minutes, which is time. Okay. So we know we're looking for an interval schedule. All right. So stop there. Let's go look. FI2, A, fixed interval. Okay. That's an interval schedule. A could be it. B, FR2, not an interval. It's out. C, VI2, interval. Yep. D, VR2. So we've narrowed it down, A and C, right? We know we're looking for an interval of 2. Okay. So what is the key word here? The key word is average. Okay. If the question read reinforcement is delivered every 2 minutes, okay, every, right, that's fixed, right? That would be A. But what it's saying is the average of every 2 minutes. So maybe sometimes it's delivered at a minute and a half, and sometimes it's delivered at 3 minutes, and sometimes it's delivered at 2 minutes, and sometimes it's delivered at a minute 45, right? What is it doing? It's varying, okay? So the only correct answer here is VI2, variable interval 2, okay? Remember, when we're dealing with reinforcement schedules, right, break down the individual parts. You should know them well enough to answer this question easily. But if you don't, look at the letters. What is the F? Is fixed, right? So it's going to be the same every time. Interval is time, okay? V, variable, changing, interval, time, okay? This is changing, and it has to do with time. And then you just plug in the number. Simple, okay? This should be an easy question. All right. Reinforcing gradual changes in behavior. Not a lot to go on here, right? Unless you know your definitions, which you should. Go watch my video on the task list. Okay. Email me, get the task list, and memorize the definitions. Okay. Easiest way to pass this test is know your definitions. Because if you know your definitions, this is an easy question because it's a definition question. Reinforcing gradual changes in behavior. Okay. That's shaping, right? What if you don't know your definitions? Well, this question is going to be almost impossible, right? You can't really fake your way through this question, right? Because if you're looking and right, reinforcing gradual changes of behavior, chaining, maybe you know what chaining is, right? So you know, well, it's not chaining, but that could be confusing, right? Because In a task chain, you are teaching steps and the behavior is gradually, they're learning, right? So maybe you could talk yourself into that. Prompting, if you don't really know, you could talk yourself into prompting. Reinforcing, well, we are reinforcing here. So blah, 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 right? Point being, in this particular question, you need to know the definition, right? You can't really fake your way through it. Okay. And this is a good example of how many questions, why people fail this test is because they miss easy questions like this because they don't know the definition, right? Everybody wants to say, well, I missed the applied questions, right? I missed all the questions that they asked me to apply it. But then you go through it and you ask them a simple definition question and they miss the easiest question on the test, right? So you can't do that, right? You need to know your definitions. So when you read this one, you answer it in 15 seconds and you move on, okay? Reinforcing gradual changes in behavior, that is shaping, okay? All right. Again, start with least intrusive prompt, okay? If you've studied, if you know your definitions, this is very, very easy, right? What is our least intrusive prompt? Okay, well, I have a prompt hierarchy, right? And if it's the least intrusive, okay, well, what type of prompting is that, right? Let's look at our answers. Forward chaining, that has nothing to do with the least intrusive prompt, right? That's a type of teaching, and you might be prompting during forward chaining, but it's got nothing to do with starting with the least intrusive prompt, right? Backward chaining, same problem, right? Nothing to do with it. Least to most prompting. Okay, now we're talking about prompting. Start with least intrusive, least to most. C looks pretty good. D, most to least. Well, D, we would be starting with the most intrusive. Okay, so what are we doing here? We're starting with the least intrusive. So it has to be C. Super, super simple. Super, super simple. Study, study, study. Watch that video. Watch my task list video. Study, 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 right? This test becomes very, very easy, right? If you know the language. All right. Okay. Okay. Now, a little something different. You're about to start a session with a client. What do you need to do to be sure you're ready to have a successful session at the very minimum? Okay. So it's just asking at the very minimum, what do you need? Okay. So you should start answering this question to yourself and thinking, what would I need to have a successful session? Okay. Knowing what you know about ABA and about being an RBT, what do you need? Okay. I know what I need, right? What are you doing as an RBT? Well, you're implementing, right? And you're taking data. That's what it boils down to, right? If you really want to boil it down, you're implementing programs and taking data. So, what do you need to do? What do you need to know and what do you need to have, right? A, you can just wing it and see how it goes session to session. I hope you don't pick this question answer, right? You should never be winging it, especially if you're on a team with multiple RBTs. Definitely don't wing it and see how it goes. Okay, that's how you get into big time behavior trouble, right? B, a cup of coffee is all you need. Well, coffee is a good idea. I recommend coffee, but is it all you need? I don't think so, right? There has to be more than just showing up ready to go, right? Yeah, you might be the best RBT in the world, but if you're not prepared, if you don't have what, you don't have what, okay? Let's see. What do you need? Okay. You should know what you're measuring during the session and have the materials required to measure the responses. I like that one. This way, when I get to the house or the clinic, I know exactly what I'm looking for. Okay. What behaviors, what targets, what programs, and I have what I need to measure my targets and my programs and my behaviors, right? So I'm ready to go. Okay. I don't need to get settled and figure out what I'm going to do today and everything else. I've just got what I need, right? I've got my pencils, my papers, my iPads, my reinforcers, my clickers, my everything, right? You know what you're measuring and you have what you need to measure. Simple as that, right? D, before starting, you should conduct a functional behavioral assessment and a full preference assessment. Well, that seems like an awful lot to do before starting just a typical session, right? So maybe your BCBA is supervising and you're going to assist, right? But doing a functional behavioral assessment every single session is not a good use of your time, right? not a good use of the client's time. It's not a good use of anybody's time, right? And a full preference assessment. Now you can run preference assessments, and you should, right, to make sure you're familiar with what the client likes and doesn't like. And if you're doing what you're supposed to do, you should know that anyway, just getting to know the client in the session, right? But doing a full one of these each and every session just isn't a smart move, right? It's not a good use of time. So at the very, very minimum, you should know what you're measuring, and you should have what you need to measure. All right. Okay, a little boy is playing with toys in his room, holding one of his stuffed animal dolls. He looks at it and says, "Zebra." Okay, so you should be somewhat familiar with basic verbal language, right? Verbal operants, as we call them, right? Interverbals, tax, mans, echoics. Nothing else, be familiar with interverbals, tax, mans, and echoics. Okay, this is a verbal behavior question, right? We are asking what type of verbal operant is this, okay? So what is he doing? Okay. A little boy is playing with toys in his room, holding one of his stuffed animal dolls. He looks at it and says zebra. So he just labeled that zebra. Okay. What is a label in verbal operant? Okay. A label is what we call a tact. Okay. If I'm just pointing at things with no prompting or no um, assistance, and nobody's asking me questions, and nobody's any of this, right? I just look in the sky and point at an airplane and just label it. That is what we call a tact. Okay. So in this situation, the boy looks at his stuffed animal and says zebra. He labels the zebra. Okay. That is a tact. That is a label. A label is a tact. Okay. Let's look at our other answers. An intraverbal. What is an intraverbal? An intraverbal would be you answering a question. So I say, "Where do you sleep?" And you say, "I sleep in a bed." Okay. Or if we're having a conversation, I say, "What did you do yesterday?" You say, "I went to the coffee shop." And then you ask me and I answer, right? We're just back and forth, right? There's a back and forth with intraverbals. Fill in intraverbals, for example. Okay. I start singing a song, "Mary had a," and the client says, "Little lamb." Okay. So an intraverbal, think of it like a response, okay? A response to an SD, okay? They're not the same, but it's just a response, okay? Is he responding to anything here? No, I did not ask him what animal is this, right? Okay, I didn't ask him name this, right? I didn't do any of that, right? I didn't ask him what's your favorite animal, okay? Nobody said anything. He just looked at the zebra and said zebra, which is a label, which is a tact. Okay, so A is wrong. B, echoic. Echoic is parroting, right? I say ball, you say ball. I say can, you say can. I say desk, you say desk. Okay, you're just echoing what I'm saying. Okay, very common with autism, especially young children with autism, right? They're just echoing back what you say. So they're exactly the same thing, right? I say go to the bathroom. Client says to the bathroom, right? He's just echoing. Okay, he's not responding. He's just copying what I'm saying. Okay. Did anybody say zebra before that boy labeled zebra? No. He just looked at the zebra and labeled it zebra. Okay. Autoclitic. I don't know if they're going to test you on autoclitic, but just so you know, an autoclitic um, modifies the verbal operant. Okay. So without getting too technical, if the boy had said, "I see a zebra," or "I think that's a zebra," the autoclitic there is "I see" or "I think." Okay. Don't worry about that too much. Okay. Worry about intraverbal echoics and tax. Autoclitics will come later. Okay. So after all that, what did he do? He labeled it. He tacked it, right? With no prompt, no SD, nobody else near him. He didn't copy anything. He just looked at the zebra and said zebra, label, independent label, which is a tact. Okay. Now, it gets a lot more technical than that, but for the sake of being an RBT and passing this test, think of it in simple terms. Okay. And then you can understand the more technical side to it. All right. Tact. When working with a client, whose preferences should take priority? Now this is interesting, right? When working with the client, whose preferences should take priority? Now, technically, your client is who's ever involved, right? So you're trying to do best by parents and grandmas, the client, siblings, everybody, right? But ultimately, whose preferences should take priority? Now, to an extent, right? Because obviously, some clients, their preference would be no work at all, and all they want to do is play Roblox all day and eat jelly beans. That's not realistic, right? So, in terms of realism, right, in terms of things we would actually consider, whose preferences should take priority? Parent? Yeah, I mean, when you're interviewing a parent, you really want to know their goals. They're the ones who are guiding this thing, right? They know them best. What do they want best for their child? That type of thing. So you should definitely consider the parents' priorities, especially over yours if you can help it, right? Teachers. Yeah, but you're not going to deal with the teachers as much, right? Unless you are a teacher. But even then, right, your preferences should probably not take priority over the parents or the clients, right? The BCBAs, as a BCBA, right, my job is to guide you and guide the parent, make recommendations, right, design treatments, okay, but I have to do it in the confines of what's realistic and what's accepted and what the family is willing to do. Okay, so there's got to be some give and take, and ultimately, if the parent says no, the parent says no. Okay, so I don't have I'm not going to overrule the parent. If they are just adamant about something, then that's what we're going to do, right? But D, the actual client. Okay, now this is where it gets tricky because you might say, well, my client is 4 and nonverbal and has attention issues and can't make requests, this, that, and the other, right? So yeah, in that case, they might not have much of a voice. Okay, but you should still understand and know what they like, right? What do they prefer? I mean, do they like playing with the paper towel rolls, right? Like I've had a client before who he liked paper towels. Okay, he's nonverbal, very low functioning, but he when he earned his break, he wanted to play with a paper towel, right? And he was motivated to work for that paper towel. So I could have given him video games, right? But that wasn't his preference. Okay. I'll give you another example of a client who's 13 and in school and can advocate for themselves and can give input. In that case, that client should really heavily be involved in session. Okay, that you should be asking that client questions, right? You should be taking into consideration what they want, their needs to an extent, right? But they should be involved. Okay, so ultimately, the person's preferences who take priority is the client. Okay, over all else, right? They are the number one. Okay, ethically, their preferences should take priority over everything else. Okay. Adding something that will motivate a person to increase the likelihood that they will engage in the target behavior again. Ooh, it's a mouthful. Okay, so don't get bogged down in the words. What are we doing here, right? We're adding something, okay, that will increase, okay, the likelihood that they will engage. Well, we know from our past questions, if you add something and it increases it, well, it's got to be positive reinforcement, right? So, what type of reinforcement? There you go. A, positive. Again, that should be an easy question. Okay, you should be very familiar with this by now. It's not negative. Some negative. It can't be. Why? Because we added something. We didn't take anything away. Continuous. We're not talking about that. Discontinuous. We're not talking about that. Okay. Positive. Added something that increased the likelihood. What type of reinforcement? Positive. Okay. Good. Go through those. Email me with questions. All right. I'm gonna put out another one within the next week or two. And good luck studying.